Okay, so now we're ready to animate this. And again, feel free to animate however you want. Since this is a very 2D and flat look, we're not going to worry about too much about doing rotations or anything in this tutorial. We're just really, again, going to scale these things on. So I'm just going to turn some of these containers off, and I'm just going to start one by one animating these on. I'm going to start with this back plate. So I'm going to come into this rectangle. I'm going to go into the transformation editor. I'm going to set my axis center to left again. I'm going to set my scaling to single. I'm going to advance my timeline out to where I want it to land, roughly about 30. I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm then going to rewind my timeline to 0 and set my scaling to 0, then set keyframe again. Here I get the little animation. If I hit play, you can see how that scales on. I'm going to move on to my headlines group, and we're just going to scale each one of these on individually too. I'll start with my back or my black Noggi here. So I'm going to click on the transformation editor. I'm going to set my axis center to the right. If you need to turn your bounding box or BB button on to see where the axis center is. So now we see that our axis center is set to the right. I'm going to set my scaling to single. I'm going to advance my timeline out to where I want it to land, roughly about 35. I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm then going to rewind my timeline to a random number of 5. I'm going to set my scaling down to 0, and we're going to set keyframe. So now I have another animation here. I hit play. We got two things animating on now. I'm going to go ahead and turn this green Noggi on. Let's do the same thing for this. We're going to set our axis center to right. I roughly want it to land around 40. I'm going to set a keyframe, and then I'm going to rewind my timeline again. Let's set it to about 10. And the single, again, we're just going to adjust it on the X until it's at 0, and we're going to hit set key again. It creates an animation. We hit play. You can see how they animate on. So I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing for this white one. So this time, let's say it's going to land around 50 roughly. We're going to set our axis center to the right. We're going to set our single to scale. So I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm then going to rewind my timeline. Roughly about 15, we're just going to adjust the scaling down to 0 again and hit set key. It creates an animation. We hit play, and now you can see how all 4 things are animating on now. So let's go ahead and animate the subline on. I'll turn this container on. I'll click on my transformation editor here. I'm going to have it scale up from the left and from the top. So I'm going to set the L button and the T button for left and top. I'm going to leave the scaling on locked. Let's say we want it to land roughly around 55, so I'm going to go ahead and set a key. Then I'm going to rewind my timeline, and roughly around here, let's scale it down to 0 and set key. So now we hit play. We have all of these things animating on. We still have our logo to do, so let's bring this up. We'll turn this on, and we'll have it land roughly about the same time at 55, so I'll just hit set key here. I'll rewind my timeline again, and let's just move it in from the left. So we'll move the position X here, and we'll hit set key. We hit play. Now we have that animating on as well. The last thing that we need to do here is our text group. So you can animate these on however you want again, but we're going to, or I'm going to use these text effects things again. So let's use the text effects scale. So let's drop this down onto our headline. I'm going to click on the TFX scale. Roughly around 55, this is where I want it to land. So I'm going to type in 100 for my progress. It's where I want it to land at 55. So I'm going to go ahead and set key. Then I'm just going to rewind this to a various number here and set this progress percentage down to 0. You can see my text disappears. I'm going to go ahead and hit set key. Again, I'm just going to cheat by taking my TFX scale plugin and dragging it up onto the Subline, and that's going to take the animation with it. So when I hit play, they both animate on. Now it's just a matter of tweaking the speed and the direction of this text effects. So let's say for the headline, I want it to come in from the opposite, and for the Subline, I'll just have it come in normal. And again, if we want to adjust the speed, we can click right on this little animation. It takes us right to that animation in the stage, and we can just kind of move these down a little in the stage so that they come on a little bit later. And maybe we'll take the subline down even further so that it comes on later, something like that. So when we go back and we just hit play, you can see everything animates on again. We'll also want this to animate off like the other scenes so that when the operator hits continue, everything goes off. So we'll go into the stage again and we'll do the same trick that we did as before. First, we have our default director here. So I'm just going to highlight that and add a stop point. Here's our stop point. So everything is going to animate on, and when it reaches that stop point, it's just going to stay there and sit. Now when they hit continue, we'll want it to fly off. So this is why we'll copy these keyframes. And again, I'm just going to use this trick by holding C and clicking and dragging these keyframes. Once again, I'm not too concerned with the speed or where these things sit on the timeline. Just because I know your time is valuable here, we'll just kind of speed up this process here and do it as quickly as possible. So as I continue to copy these and scale these out, you can see when we're all done, we hit play. It sits at the stop point, it stops there. Then when we hit continue, everything is now going to go off. And you can see this stop point here, this black line shows us where it's stopping. So we have one keyframe here that's over that line a little bit. If you ever see that, you can just slide it back. So it's going to come to a complete animation before it hits that stop point. So this looks okay. Everything seems to animate off as well. Last thing that we need to do is just set our control text here so that the graphic operator can now swap out the text. And we'll go into our built-ins and into our control folder. And we're going to add the control text to our headline. I'm going to click on the control text and go into the editor. I'm going to keep the field identifier at 1. The description is headline. I'm going to keep all these things at their default setting. I'm going to drag another control text onto the subline. I'm going to click on the control text icon to go into the editor. And we're going to change this field identifier to 2. And we'll keep the description as subline. And also keep all these default settings the same. And by the way, if you want to know what all these things do, we have a whole tutorial on these control plugins. So you can go in and watch a video for each individual control plugin too. So this scene should be all set up and ready to go for us to test in Trio. But before we do that, we're actually going to design a couple more scenes. So let's save this and get ready to design our next scene.